Hey friends, welcome back to another wellness chat. I am going to be responding to a type of comment I've gotten a whole lot over the last couple of months. I will be reading a few examples and then we will get into all of my thoughts on the subject. Before we get started, let's thank Element for sponsoring the video today. Element is my favorite electrolyte drink mix. It comes in these little packets that are super easy to throw into your purse. I have them like in every pocket of my purse. This is the raspberry salt. This is the new lemonade salt that is limited edition for the summer. And these together make a very delicious raspberry lemonade. Very, very good. I highly recommend trying it. When I first started supplementing electrolytes, I did not realize how dehydrated I had been. And one of the main benefits that I saw was that I was no longer getting up to go to the bathroom multiple times at night. And of course, when you're getting up multiple times at night, you're not getting optimal sleep. And so supplementing with electrolytes was really, really key for me to get that full night's sleep again. And so it really benefited, every aspect of my life. Sleep is so important. So if you want to try Element out and see if it might be right for you, you can get a free sample pack just by using my link, drinkelement.com/indigo, drinklmnt.com/indigo. Click that link and place an order for anything on the website, either the drink mixes or the sparkling element that is also really, really good. And you will automatically get an 8-stick sample pack added to your order. In the sample pack, there are 2 sticks of each of their 4 most popular flavors, so you can try those out. And the sample pack is also great for passing on the gift of hydration to a friend. Thanks again to Element for sponsoring the video today. So I am going to read a few comments, and these were comments that were left on my sugar fasting, sugar diet experiment videos. So these comments are in response to me talking about starting the sugar experiment and kind of the high carb, low fat diet experiment that I am in right now. So the first comment says, "I'm so confused. Isn't this simply the standard dietary guidelines that have made us all metabolically sick? Low fat, lots of sugar in all its various outfits." Okay, and then the next one is, "Didn't we already learn through the Snackwells era?" And last one, "So you're essentially going back to the diet that caused issues, expecting different results. What's the fundamental difference between the standard American diet and your sugar diet experiment?" So my first response to that is that the sugar fasting experiment that I did is a style of eating that I never in my 41 years of life have ever eaten before. I think it's very common to look at a diet, one aspect of it, and a different diet with that same aspect in it as being the same. Even when there might be other things in that diet that are different. So for example, in the keto world, it's very frustrating when a study comes out saying that we compared a low carbohydrate diet to a low fat diet, and here are the results. And you hear a lot of keto advocates talking about how the low carb diet in the study was not even what they would consider low carb. So just because in the 80s and the 90s, people ate a low fat, high carb diet, that does not mean that this version of a low fat, high carb diet is the same. There is such a wide variation in what can be called low fat, what can be called low carb, and depending on where you're coming from, you could have vastly different ideas of what a high carb diet is than a fruitarian might have of what a high carb diet is. And even the people that are advocating the sugar diet and talking about following the sugar diet, they would never say that it's okay to eat that amount of sugar plus fat. It's not that sugar is just a health food that they're saying everyone should just dump onto their current diet. One of the key reasons people are seeing weight loss with the sugar diet is not just the sugar, but the absence of the fat and the protein. The absence of the protein causes the stimulation of FGF21, which raises your metabolic rate. And then the reduction in fat actually, it seems, helps you become more insulin sensitive so that your body can actually efficiently use the insulin it produces to take care of the carbohydrates, and it doesn't have to overproduce. When you have lots of fatty acids in your cells, it seems the insulin can't work as well, and it's not as efficient, and you're not as insulin sensitive. But when you reduce the fat in the diet, your cells can hear the message of insulin a lot more clearly, and you actually end up needing less insulin to deal with more carbohydrates. So the reduction in fat is key. So I cannot speak for anybody else besides myself. I was born in 1984, and so through the 80s and the 90s, I was not really dieting. I was a kid, and so I never went on an ultra low fat diet. But from my perception at the time, I didn't see the majority of people eating a high carb, very low fat, very low protein diet consistently. I mean, fast food was super popular. Lots of people were eating French fries. TV dinners, very popular. People were doing things like eating a lot of margarine, but it was still fat, and actually probably a fat that is even worse for insulin resistance. That's, my guess. Maybe they were eating less butter, but I didn't see people really eating as low amount of fat as the sugar diet recommends. And then on top of that, I think there is a huge, can't be overstated difference between ultra processed food like Snackwells and whole food. And this is one of those things that I have concerns about with the sugar diet for the people who are leaning very heavily into candy and soda and things like that. That's not something that I have ever tried or intend to advocate for. I do understand the mechanisms in how they work, and that is fascinating, but I think there's concerns beyond just the weight loss side of it that would, definitely stop me from trying it or from recommending it, of course. But as far as the 80s and 90s, I mean, my childhood diet was saturated in processed food, Oreos and Wonder Bread and American cheese. And in my house, we did have a lot of real food also. My mom cooked a lot of stuff from scratch. And so I definitely did have, a mix of whole food and processed food, which I'm thankful for, but there's just no comparison to the high carb, low fat diet that I am playing with now. Even the one that I was playing with in my sugar diet experiment, and the diet I ate in the 80s and 90s as a kid. It is like there's almost no comparison. I find the argument that the high carb, low fat, whole foods diet, or even the sugar fasting is the same as the standard American diet. I find that argument to be very similar to someone saying, I've tried the keto diet, or I've tried a high fat diet because I ate a diet of fast food growing up. And of course, anyone that is an advocate of the keto diet or low carb diet will say, well, no, just because you ate a high fat diet doesn't mean that you ate a low carb diet. You can't just compare one aspect of the diet and say the whole diet is the same. So for me personally, in my own dieting experience, this is something, this high carb, low fat thing that I'm playing with right now is completely different from anything, any way that I have ever eaten in the past. I can't say the same for everyone else through the 80s and 90s, but from my perception, I didn't see a lot of people eating a whole foods, high carb, low fat diet. And I think we should be comparing apples to apples and not just throwing this out saying because it has sugar in it, therefore it is the same as the standard American diet. Hey, this is future editing Nili coming in for another little addition here. And that is that the high carb, low fat diet that I am doing right now, like I've already said, I don't feel like it's anywhere near the standard American diet, either the one I ate in the 80s and 90s or the current standard American diet. But what I do find it very similar to is another sad diet, maybe the standard African diet and possibly the standard Asian diet as well. All of them work with the SAD acronym, which is quite fun. When I was a teenager, I spent some time in Africa on some mission trips, several months at a time. And so I kind of got to observe the diets there. And it was very common for the people there to eat a huge meal of, and huge in volume, of starch and of fruit, especially during the first part of the day. And often there wouldn't be any meat involved in the meals until the evening, where they would have another big pile of starch and then maybe a small amount of meat. It wasn't any big 16-ounce ribeyes or anything like that for the people there. The main starch in the area that I spent the most time in, which was Malawi, is a corn or a maize porridge called tsima. Nsima. It's called different things in different areas, but it's very common throughout Africa. Sudza, and there's various different names of it. And so it is like a corn porridge, so nearly 100% carbs. And sometimes that would be all that they would eat in a meal, or they'd have some vegetables with it. But it was always like this huge pile of the tsima and then a little bit of maybe vegetables. And of course, fruits were available a lot of the year there. And so people would be eating fruits. And so it was a very high carb diet, very moderate protein from what I saw, the protein that's in the plant foods, and then a little bit of meat, maybe once a day, was pretty common. And then there wasn't tons of fat. There was a little bit, like if they had slaughtered a goat, they would use the goat fat to like fry up potatoes or something like that. But that was pretty rare. The day in and day out diet that I saw, and this is again my own personal perception, very high carb, I would guess pretty low in fat. They, of course, did eat the whole animal. So like the whole chicken, they would even, like chew on the chicken feet, like crunch on them. So they were getting some fat in there, but the amount of animal food they ate was so small, it ended up being a pretty small part of the meal. So it wouldn't be uncommon for them to have a nearly 100% carb breakfast, nearly 100% carb lunch, and then a lot of carbs plus a little bit of veggies and protein for dinner. And that is actually very, very similar to the like intermittent sugar fast type thing that a lot of people are doing, where they're having mostly fruits and honey throughout the day and then a meal with some starch and some protein at dinner time. Obviously, there are some differences, but I'd say that that is a lot more similar to the sugar fasting experiment that I did and what I'm seeing a lot of other people doing than the standard American diet. And I know that Africa has its own set of health issues that should not be ignored. But one thing that they do not deal with is an obesity epidemic like we do in the US. One more thing that I'll throw in here is that there is this incredible article that I really hope I would love for all of you to go read it. And I'm going to put the link in the description. It is an article by Denise Minger from a few years ago. And if you were in the paleo world back in the day, you might remember her name. She did a really great rebuttal to the China study, which is a vegan book. Anyways, that was a whole thing. But then more recently, she did a talk at, I think, the Ancestral Health Symposium about what can we learn from low-fat diets, or what can we learn? I don't remember if it was vegan diets or low-fat or both. And so she did a really great talk about what we can learn from the low-fat community. And she also wrote this article in defense of low-fat. And she talks about how, like, we know, anyone in the keto community knows that there is this metabolic magic that happens in the ketogenic side of the spectrum, the very high fat, the very low carb, and moderate protein to lower protein. There's something there. Like, obviously we see that. And what Denise Minger showed was that there's also this metabolic magic that seems to happen on the other end of the spectrum. When you get down to like 10 to 15% fat in your diet, there's some really crazy metabolic magic that can happen. And she goes through like the history of nutrition and talks about Walter Kempner and others who have used this very low fat, very high carb diet approach to do some crazy stuff, like healing diabetes, not just band-aiding diabetes with the diet, like never feeding yourself sugar so that you don't have to deal with it. But like Walter Kempner reversed diabetes in people with sugar and white rice. Like it's mind-blowing. And so my approach and what I've tried to challenge myself to do is not to get closed-minded, not to see one side of the story that seems to make sense to me and throw out all of the other information that might be out there. I think a lot of times we really want to have a tribe and we really want to think of everyone else as idiots. When we think we've figured it out, then we just think of everyone else as idiots. But my opinion, if we can be open-minded and learn from everybody, I think our own wisdom will increase. Instead of just getting stuck in this little box of wisdom, we can actually take wisdom from all different areas. I don't know. Is that too much to ask? That's just my thoughts on the subject. So I spent a lot of years in the keto wisdom box with reaping the benefits of the metabolic magic that is ketosis. And I found that it did come with some drawbacks, and I'm working through that right now. And now I am experimenting and playing with this other metabolic magic that might be out there. And it's fascinating. And I am taking what I can from that and applying it to my life, however it works. And we'll just gonna see where we get. So thanks for hanging out with me in this wellness chat today. Let me know if you have any thoughts. Please keep them kind. If you could, I would appreciate it. And I will see you again in the next video.